Morning everyone, it's Peter with the Garden Family. It is July 28th and today we're just going to do some tasks for the garden to transition it from a summer garden to a fall garden. So come along with me as I do some garden maintenance. So we're here with the paste tomatoes. Remember, if you watched the walkthrough video, these are all grown in straw. So we have 36 tomato plants and they're just starting to come in. They are determinate plants, which means a lot of them are going to ripen around the same time. I'm going to take a little bit of time here and just harvest just off this one tiny section, so you can get a sense of how many tomatoes we're gonna have. I'm gonna be pretty busy making tomato sauce here, but if I just spend 30 seconds or so in here, you will get a sense of just how many we have. These ones are Paisano. That's what we grew last year. You can see they're a little different than some of these others. I think that's a super sauce hybrid. We grew 4 different varieties to try to compare yields, but there was a big storm at one point and all the tomato plants got mixed up. So I don't think I'm going to be able to do the comparison video there. But let me just keep going. I mean, look at these clusters of tomatoes here. Now you can see some of them I'm picking and they're not really ripe. We can just put those on the counter and those will ripen very easily. Yeah, if you look over here, I mean, it doesn't even look like I've made a dent in these couple plants. But already got a bowl of tomatoes. So we'll be harvesting, probably a quarter-ish of these. And that way we can kind of sequence out our tomato sauce. Our goal is always to have enough tomato sauce to last us until this time next year. Wow, look at all these tomatoes. Got a whole wheelbarrow full. Yeah, too heavy to lift. That's just the first picking. 36 plants, absolutely amazing. All grown in straw bales. Great harvest this year. So this ugly looking bed with a tarp on it, I recently terminated a buckwheat cover crop here. This is actually where we had our garlic. And so what I did is I just chopped and dropped the buckwheat cover crop, put a little bit of compost, and then just kept a tarp over it to keep the moisture in, help it kind of compost and break down. Because within a week or two, we're actually gonna be planting our fall brassicas in here. I can show you what it kind of looks like now. We just did this not too long ago, but basically we're just letting this cover crop break down, and then there's just some compost in there as well. So you can see it's kept pretty moist in here just from this tarp. That's why I like to keep this on here. You do want to give the cover crop a few weeks to break down prior to planting in it, because initially you can get a little bit of nitrogen tie up as that breakdown starts before that gets released back into the bed. So we've actually have our fall brassicas started indoors. Better to start them indoors in the heat of summer because they like cooler weather, and we'll be planting those out in a couple weeks in this bed as well as the onion bed that we need to finish harvesting as well. Next on the list is harvesting onions, but first we have to clear a few things out of the barn to make space for them on the drying rack. So first thing we need to do is just make some space in the barn. We've been curing our garlic as well as our intermediate day onions, which bulb sooner than our long day onions. So we're going to clear up this drying rack here, and then we're going to go harvest our long day onions. Now that we've made some space, it is time to harvest our long day onions. So these are long day storage onions. I have super sweet yellow Utah Jumbo as well as Patterson are the two varieties that I grew this year. And you can see if we zoom in right here, I am experimenting with significantly closer spacing on these. Last year, sort of a strange complaint, but last year we had really big onions and they were almost too big for a recipe calling for, one onion. So this year we decided to try to grow more kind of medium-sized onions. Let's see how we did. So we're gonna start pulling some of these. If you look here, the foliage looks like it's dying. And that's how you want the onions to be when you're taking them out. And so looks like we're gonna have a pretty decent harvest of a lot of these sort of medium-sized onions. Some of these are a little bit smaller, but that's still a decent size onion there. Let's get a few more of these out. I like to kind of get a finger underneath here and kind of pull those roots so you don't really have too much root down this way. You can do a twist there too if you want. You just want to make sure you're not, breaking any of the protective layerings there. Well, I think you get the idea. I'm gonna go ahead and harvest all of these and then we're gonna put them in the barn where those other onions used to be. I'll have a fan on them for a few weeks to cure them, and then they should store all the way up until next year. So now I'm in the barn just getting these onions ready for the curing process. I don't normally cut the green portion of the onion, but in this case I had so many onions that I knew it was going to be on 2 rows, and I wanted to make sure that there was good airflow between the 2 and the top rows. Greens weren't coming down and touching the bottom onions. I just used these old closet wire racks and then place the onions upside down. And then you'll see me getting a fan ready, and I'm going to leave that fan on the onions for about 3 weeks total until everything is perfectly dry. Down in the melon patch, just some maintenance here. I talked a little bit about bacterial wilt. You could see this vine succumbed to it. You definitely want to get these vines out of here because the cucumber beetles will continue to munch on them and then they'll spread it from plant to plant. So sometimes you just got to call it quits with plants. It's actually one of the harder things to learn as a newer gardener, is just kind of when to say that's not working out. Things that are working out, however, are the watermelons. So let's go take a look at those. First of all, if we come over here, there's just so many that we're gonna need to think of some sort of fun recipes for watermelon, but I saw one over there that I think is just about ripe. And trying to time the picking of watermelon is really difficult. I'm gonna walk around here because it's just hard to get up that way, but we're gonna come up here and I'll show you on this one. So this is one of our sugar baby watermelons. Pretty good size for a compact watermelon. And I think this one's just about ready. It's a little hard to see here, but if we look right there, these little tendrils that are right next to the melon, they are starting to dry out. And so that's a pretty decent sign that this is about ripe. You got to get the timing right on these because if you pick them too early, they don't ripen on the counter. So I say we try this one and see what happens. What do you think? Think we should do it? Let's do it. These stems are really tough. Usually we have some scissors, but let's go cut this open and see what it looks like. All right, moment of truth here. Let's take a look. If it's not ripe, it's not gonna be good, so we'll see what happens. I'm kind of excited. Wow, that looks great. All right, I have to try a piece. It's good. It's watermelon season. These cherry tomatoes are absolutely amazing this year, and I wanted to go over a little bit of how I've trellised them and what I'm gonna do now that they've reached the top of these 8-foot cages. So come on over here, let me show you how I've trellised them first. So I talked about this in the last video, but a lot of people had questions about how I made these cages and then what I did to trellis these tomatoes up. I'm gonna talk about it on the Sun Gold because the Super Sweet 100 is super vigorous and harder to see into. And this one's doing great as well, just a little bit smaller. So the first thing is, these cages you can see are 8 feet tall. I'm 6'2", and they are made from cattle panels. Those normally come in about 16 by 4 foot length. So I cut them in half, first of all, and then each half I bent in an L shape. So this is actually 2 separate pieces. And if we look right here, you can see I've got some zip ties holding this piece and that piece. So this one goes here and on that side, and then this other panel is sort of centered over on me over here. Hi. So then what I did, so I've got these together, I've zip tied them together. If we come over this way, you can see just for support, I've placed 1 T-post here. It's a little hard to see just because of all these tomatoes, but you can kind of see the T-post right here. And then I've zip tied the whole thing to the T-post. So one of the nice things about having those 2 panels is at the end of the season, you can take this apart and then the panels sort of inset into each other. So you can have a whole bunch of these panels and they just don't take up that much space because they can all stack on top of each other. So that's how I made those. Bending them is a little bit difficult, but what I found is if you have a 2x4 that you stand on, you can then bend them over. It might take a couple people. These are pretty hardy panels, and so they are hard to bend, but that also means they actually last, unlike those crappy tomato cages that you buy at the store. Now let's talk about how these are trellised. I'll walk over to the Super Sweet 100 over here so you can kind of see it in all of its glory. So I've got the cage, and this is all one plant. A lot of people ask how many plants is that? It's just one. And if we look down at the bottom, you can see the plant coming up right here. So here's the one plant, and initially I've just got a little stake right in the middle of the cage just to give it a little support while it's growing first. As the plant was growing, I allowed it to send multiple side shoots up. If we just sort of track this one, the first one that comes off, this one came this way. And if we look in here, I then allowed that same branch to branch again. And that's what created two separate leaders here and here that I then trained up the vertical components of the trellises. Once I got 12 of those leaders, then I removed all the side shoots so that these were just one vertical component. In fact, if we look right here, we've got a side shoot that is not useful because, again, I'm training these all to 1 leader. So once I've got all 12 leaders, that's when I'm going to break those off and just continue them up the trellis. Now, I've gotten to the point where I'm over the top of the 8 feet. So I have a fun plan where I'm actually going to try to create a tree canopy there. And I'm going to pop right over here to grab and show you what the plan is. And I'll show you on this one just so you can see a little bit better. But basically, I'm going to get this 10-foot EMT conduit, and I'm going to zip tie it up top and then allow the plant to canopy out horizontally. Assuming everything works, I think it's going to look really neat seeing the tomatoes kind of hanging down like clusters of grapes. So look for that in a future video update. Well, I finished 2 of the big projects today, harvesting the onions and getting the tomatoes harvested. Didn't quite get the tomato tree up, and that's for 2 reasons. One, it started raining a lot and it doesn't look like it's gonna stop. And 2, more importantly, I thought I had more zip ties and I need to go get more. So I'll have to finish this another week, but I will get back to you guys and show you how it is. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions at all, leave them down in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. And if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to our channel. You'll be able to see how this turns out in a future video. Happy gardening, everyone.